Welcome to Center Quiz. Can you name all 250 countries and territories in the world? Before we start, don't forget to subscribe for more fun and exciting quizzes. Are you ready? Let's go! What country's flag is this? Sierra Leone. What country's flag is this? Ivory Coast. What country's flag is this? Tunisia. What country's flag is this? Benin. What country's flag is this? Cape Verde. What country's flag is this? Uganda. What country's flag is this? Burundi. What country's flag is this? South Africa. What country's flag is this? Libya. What country's flag is this? Gabon. What country's flag is this? Egypt. What country's flag is this? Senegal. What country's flag is this? Zambia. What country's flag is this? Niger. What country's flag is this? Guinea-Bissau. What country's flag is this? Reunion. What country's flag is this? Djibouti. What country's flag is this? Mauritius. What country's flag is this? Morocco. What country's flag is this? Algeria. How many questions have you answered so far? Comment below. Let's keep going. What country's flag is this? Sudan. What country's flag is this? Botswana. What country's flag is this? Mayotte. What country's flag is this? Madagascar. What country's flag is this? Eswatini. What country's flag is this? Namibia. What country's flag is this? Sao Tome and Principe. What country's flag is this? Malawi. What country's flag is this? Ethiopia. What country's flag is this? Lesotho. What country's flag is this? Western Sahara. What country's flag is this? Equatorial Guinea. What country's flag is this? Cameroon. What country's flag is this? Guinea. What country's flag is this? Dr. Congo. What country's flag is this? Somalia. What country's flag is this? St. Helena, Ascension, and Tristan da Cunha. What country's flag is this? Togo. What country's flag is this? Kenya. What country's flag is this? Rwanda. Don't stop now. Keep going and challenge yourself. Let's see how far you can go. What country's flag is this? Mozambique. What country's flag is this? Central African Republic. What country's flag is this? Burkina Faso. What country's flag is this? Eritrea. What country's flag is this? Tanzania. What country's flag is this? Mauritania. What country's flag is this? Angola. What country's flag is this? Mali. What country's flag is this? Seychelles. What country's flag is this? British Indian Ocean Territory. What country's flag is this? Gambia. What country's flag is this? Nigeria. What country's flag is this? South Sudan. What country's flag is this? Liberia. What country's flag is this? Comoros. What country's flag is this? Ghana. What country's flag is this? Chad. What country's flag is this? Zimbabwe. What country's flag is this? Republic of the Congo. What country's flag is this? Grenada. If you're enjoying this challenge, hit that like button and subscribe for more. What country's flag is this? Barbados. What country's flag is this? St. Kitts and Nevis. What country's flag is this? Caribbean Netherlands. What country's flag is this? Mexico. What country's flag is this? St. Bartholomew. What country's flag is this? Peru. What country's flag is this? Aruba. What country's flag is this? Montserrat. What country's flag is this? United States Virgin Islands. What country's flag is this? Colombia. What country's flag is this? Puerto Rico. What country's flag is this? Dominican Republic. What country's flag is this? Paraguay. What country's flag is this? El Salvador. What country's flag is this? Greenland. What country's flag is this? Cuba. What country's flag is this? Canada. What country's flag is this? Saint Pierre and Miquelon. What country's flag is this? Saint Martin. What country's flag is this? Argentina. What country's flag is this? Turks and Caicos Islands. What country's flag is this? Dominica. What country's flag is this? Costa Rica. What country's flag is this? Haiti. What country's flag is this? Honduras. What country's flag is this? St. Lucia. What country's flag is this? Guadeloupe. What country's flag is this? Suriname. What country's flag is this? British Virgin Islands. What country's flag is this? Trinidad and Tobago. What country's flag is this? Guyana. What country's flag is this? Uruguay. What country's flag is this? Antigua and Barbuda. What country's flag is this? Panama. What country's flag is this? Curacao. What country's flag is this? French Guiana. What country's flag is this? United States Minor Outlying Islands. What country's flag is this? Falkland Islands. What country's flag is this? Bolivia. What country's flag is this? Chile. Wow, that was a tricky one. Did you get it right? Let me know in the comments. What country's flag is this? United States. What country's flag is this? St. Vincent and the Grenadines. What country's flag is this? Bermuda. What country's flag is this? Guatemala. What country's flag is this? Ecuador. What country's flag is this? Martinique. What country's flag is this? Bahamas. What country's flag is this? Brazil. What country's flag is this? Belize. What country's flag is this? Venezuela. What country's flag is this? Jamaica. What country's flag is this? Cayman Islands. What country's flag is this? Saint Martin. What country's flag is this? Nicaragua. What country's flag is this? Anguilla. What country's flag is this? South Georgia. What country's flag is this? Antarctica. What country's flag is this? Bouvet Island. What country's flag is this? French Southern and Antarctic lands. What country's flag is this? Heard Island and McDonald Islands. This is your moment to shine. Show off your knowledge in the comments. What country's flag is this? Taiwan. What country's flag is this? Indonesia. What country's flag is this? Laos. What country's flag is this? China. What country's flag is this? Yemen. What country's flag is this? Uzbekistan. What country's flag is this? Sri Lanka. What country's flag is this? Palestine. What country's flag is this? Bangladesh. What country's flag is this? Singapore. What country's flag is this? Turkey. What country's flag is this? Afghanistan. What country's flag is this? Azerbaijan. What country's flag is this? North Korea. What country's flag is this? Nepal. What country's flag is this? Georgia. What country's flag is this? Pakistan. What country's flag is this? Lebanon. What country's flag is this? Qatar. What country's flag is this? India. What country's flag is this? Syria. What country's flag is this? United Arab Emirates. What country's flag is this? Cambodia. What country's flag is this? Iraq. What country's flag is this? Kyrgyzstan. What country's flag is this? Malaysia. What country's flag is this? Saudi Arabia. What country's flag is this? Oman. What country's flag is this? Macau. What country's flag is this? Thailand. What country's flag is this? Philippines. What country's flag is this? Bahrain. What country's flag is this? Timor-Leste. What country's flag is this? Vietnam. What country's flag is this? Hong Kong. What country's flag is this? Turkmenistan. What country's flag is this? South Korea. What country's flag is this? Jordan. What country's flag is this? Kazakhstan. What country's flag is this?
Armenia.
Almost there. Keep pushing and let's see who can score the highest. What country's flag is this?
Japan.
What country's flag is this?
Tajikistan.
What country's flag is this?
Kuwait.
What country's flag is this?
Maldives.
What country's flag is this?
Iran.
What country's flag is this?
Myanmar.
What country's flag is this?
Bhutan.
What country's flag is this?
Brunei.
What country's flag is this?
Mongolia.
What country's flag is this?
Israel.
What country's flag is this?
Switzerland.
What country's flag is this?
Hungary.
What country's flag is this?
Italy.
What country's flag is this?
Andorra.
What country's flag is this?
France.
What country's flag is this?
North Macedonia.
What country's flag is this?
Guernsey.
What country's flag is this?
Svalbard and Jan Mayen.
What country's flag is this?
Faroe Islands.
What country's flag is this?
United Kingdom.
What country's flag is this?
Finland.
What country's flag is this?
Greece.
What country's flag is this?
Croatia.
What country's flag is this?
Netherlands.
What country's flag is this?
Liechtenstein.
What country's flag is this?
Monaco.
What country's flag is this?
Montenegro.
What country's flag is this?
Ukraine.
What country's flag is this?
Isle of Man.
What country's flag is this?
Bulgaria.
What country's flag is this?
Germany.
What country's flag is this?
Sweden.
What country's flag is this?
Russia.
What country's flag is this?
Cyprus.
What country's flag is this?
Bosnia and Herzegovina.
What country's flag is this?
Spain.
What country's flag is this?
Slovenia.
What country's flag is this?
San Marino.
What country's flag is this?
Iceland.
What country's flag is this?
Luxembourg.
If you're loving this, make sure to subscribe. More epic challenges are coming soon. What country's flag is this?
Belarus.
What country's flag is this?
Latvia.
What country's flag is this?
Gibraltar.
What country's flag is this?
Denmark.
What country's flag is this?
Czechia.
What country's flag is this?
Estonia.
What country's flag is this?
Romania.
What country's flag is this?
Vatican City.
What country's flag is this?
Austria.
What country's flag is this?
Ireland.
What country's flag is this?
Norway.
What country's flag is this?
Åland Islands.
What country's flag is this?
Lithuania.
What country's flag is this?
Slovakia.
What country's flag is this?
Moldova.
What country's flag is this?
Jersey.
What country's flag is this?
Malta.
What country's flag is this?
Kosovo.
What country's flag is this?
Albania.
What country's flag is this?
Serbia.
Final stretch. If you've made it this far, you're a real champion. What country's flag is this?
Poland.
What country's flag is this?
Portugal.
What country's flag is this?
Belgium.
What country's flag is this?
Wallis and Futuna.
What country's flag is this?
Pitcairn Islands.
What country's flag is this?
Northern Mariana Islands.
What country's flag is this?
Solomon Islands.
What country's flag is this?
Cook Islands.
What country's flag is this?
Christmas Island.
What country's flag is this?
Tokelau.
What country's flag is this?
Fiji.
What country's flag is this?
Papua New Guinea.
What country's flag is this?
Norfolk Island.
What country's flag is this?
Marshall Islands.
What country's flag is this?
Nauru.
What country's flag is this?
Cocos, Keeling Islands.
What country's flag is this?
Australia.
What country's flag is this?
Tuvalu.
What country's flag is this?
French Polynesia.
What country's flag is this?
Palau.
What country's flag is this?
New Caledonia.
What country's flag is this?
Vanuatu.
What country's flag is this?
Niue.
What country's flag is this?
Micronesia.
What country's flag is this?
Samoa.
What country's flag is this?
Guam.
What country's flag is this?
Tonga.
What country's flag is this?
Kiribati.
What country's flag is this?
American Samoa.
What country's flag is this?
New Zealand.
Subscribe now, and never miss a valuable knowledge challenge.